Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Hiltscher. He's the VP of Gaming Communications at ESL. And in particular, he is in charge of the ESL Play, which is their global platform that allows amateur and semi-professional leagues and tournaments to play using over 100 different games, including some of the latest games. And his topic today will be how to get started in esports for competitive, mobile, and indie games. So without much further ado, hand it off to David.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome, everybody. I would like to talk today about how to get started. So I hope there's some indie and mobile developers here that are looking for some concrete advice what to do and how to get started in esports. As ESL, we talk to basically every game developer studio in the world when they want to get into esports at conferences and at various other opportunities, and we always get kind of the same questions. So I felt like it might make sense to compile all the questions and the answers that we've given over the years into a talk that I will hold today, and I hope it will help you figure out your esports strategy. Just a quick slide on ESL. I assume most of you are nowadays familiar with us. So we're the biggest esports company in the world. So we bring together game developers and studios and publishers with name brands, with traditional TV broadcasting, with event venues, with the pro gamers, with the teams and the players. We've been around for 16 years now. The company was founded in the year 2000. We're now spread out all over the globe with a headquarters in Germany, but a large office in Burbank in Los Angeles and offices all over the world, as well as studio infrastructure. I don't think I need to talk anything about esports. I assume everybody is aware that it's a big thing. I feel it's a bit important to stress where we see our role in the games industry. And that is that ESL is kind of providing a structure for emerging sports. And we treat games, every single game that we run leagues and tournaments for, as a sport. That's a slightly different viewpoint as to just saying it's a game, it's a product, it needs to go out there, it needs to sell, it needs to monetize. But we feel it's more akin to any traditional sport that you know, be it tennis or football or racing, anything that people enjoy as a hobby, as something that they enjoy to participate in competitively. And basically any sport that you know is also sort of a game. So that's a kind of philosophical standpoint that we take and that informs basically all of our strategies and actions, and also when we talk to developers and give them advice on what they should do with their game. Now, not every game starts out to become or is a 100 million player base esports title like League of Legends, which got to that place very, very rapidly. Normally, and that's the thing that we see with most games that at some point make it big in esports, is that there's a progression over time where you start out small player base, small levels of competition, and you slowly add layers to it and you grow it. It's like a baby, you need to feed it, you need to make sure that you hold its hands during tough times. And emerging sports are pretty much the same. You will see over time that star players emerge, that certain commentators become prominent, YouTubers will latch onto your game if you become more and more successful. And the level of service that we provide kind of helps scale that up over time. So we kind of have the perfect products for every stage in the development of a game, but I believe for many indie and mobile developers, initially there's very little money, there's no budget to really talk to a company like us and say, hey, can we give you some money so you build out our esports initiative. So this talk is a bit more about what can you do as a kind of a do-it-yourself solution. What can you do in the early stages of your game and help it grow. Just so we're clear about what kind of games we're talking about, there's certain common properties that games that are successful in esports do have, and I just want to quickly highlight that so we all know that we're talking about the same thing here. And one of the key things is that the games that we support tend to be synchronous PvP. I know that there's certain sports, both in traditional and also in esports, that are asynchronous. Think of rally racing, for example. Think of athletics, basically everything where you throw a ball or a spear or anything. These tend to be asynchronous, but the really successful sports, both in traditional sports and in esports, are synchronous. It's one person against another person at the same time, or a team against another team at the same time. Nowadays we see a lot of games being free to play, just a low barrier of entry, long lifespan of users, and essentially you make the money with the user over the term of the life cycle, and that can be many, many years. If we look at games like Counter-Strike, you're looking at a lifespan of a game now of 10, 15 years, and Riot famously went out and said we don't imagine a world where League of Legends will not be around 100 years from now. And I feel like that's the direction that we're heading with when we talk about games and esports. These games are built for the long term. So that's something that you need to keep in mind when you design your games or think about whether esports is an attractive choice for your game. Does it have enough meat? Does it have enough depth to support a long lifespan of the game? Will it still be fun to play after you've invested 1,000 hours? Can you still learn something new? The great example are League of Legends and Dota 2. Personally, I've played Dota 2 for 1,500 hours. I have played maybe 30% of the champions that are in the game, and the few that I have played, I can't even really play them properly still. And that drives me to still go into the game and learn about it. The skill curve, this immense depth of gameplay is something that drives the motivation of players to continue playing the game. So these are kind of the factors that you should consider about like checkboxes that you should check if you want to think about esports. Not all of these are required, but I think the most successful games are essentially covering all 6 of these points. So let's talk a bit about design and game design, things that you need to keep in mind or that you need to consider when you are building a game, or especially in the early design phases. I mean, when I talk to game developers, usually they already have a very clear idea of the gameplay mechanics, and that's great. That's something that you guys need to figure out. You need to be innovative. You need to have something that's really fun to play at its core, great mechanics. But then there's certain aspects of the game that you need to carefully consider when you put your game out there. One being game modes. I see, especially with game developers that come like from university that make their first game, they see they discovered a key mechanic in the game that they want to build their game around, and they come up with all these game modes that they can support. And there's capture the flag and team deathmatch and some objective-based gameplay for shooters, for example. And there's a tendency to just add game modes, because it tends to be rather easy once you have the core mechanics locked down to add more game modes. But in general, if you look at successful games, they only offer one key game mode. If you look at shooters, Counter-Strike is arguably the most successful game in esports. It only has one game mode, or one main game mode. There's some minor ones, but they don't really matter. League of Legends, Dota 2 are also one game mode games. League of Legends just recently announced the end of their Dominion experiment that they started 4 years ago, where they thought they could introduce a secondary game mode, but it just didn't work. Figure out what game mode you would like to start off with. You can still experiment later on, but I feel it's very recommended to focus on one game mode and make that really, really good. X on X is also a consideration. If you want to go into esports, there's certain consequences of picking a certain X on X. One of the famous examples there is World of Tanks, that started out as a 15 versus 15 game. Then they wanted to go more into esports once they saw their game was rather successful, and they noticed 15 versus 15 does not work for esports competitions at all. It's just too big of a team size. So they had, once they wanted to do actual esports events where people travel, where you need to set up computers, where you need to have table space on a stage, they realized they need to go with a much smaller X on X. They, in the end, settled on 7 versus 7, which the game was not built for. So you had maps that were too large, the game mode was, the main mode was not balanced for 7 versus 7, and still to this day, 4 years after they entered esports, they're struggling to adjust their game to that new game mode, to that new X on X. One-on-one is always great, it's fine. What we've seen in the past, what works best is generally 5-on-5. That's mostly a game mode where you can still swap out one player if needs be, but it already creates a certain team dynamic. When you have a live event, you can still have highlights on each of the players. Everybody kind of has a name, has a face. They don't get lost in a crowd of 15 different players on a team. Win conditions and draws, that's something that often gets disregarded as well, and that can have major consequences. That's a design consideration that you need to take very early on. That means in esports competitions, try to make your game mode in a way that it does not allow draws. At some point you will want to run leagues and tournaments, and it's just a mess if you have draws. Look at football, it's a game that inherently can have draws, and it took them until like the 70s to figure out at least some sort of solution to resolve draws during playoff tournaments, and their solution is obviously penalty shooting, which I guess everybody is kind of aware is a bit random. And you don't want a random factor to determine the winner of your future world championship. Try to make your game in a way that it avoids draw. You can get around a bit with it, with best of 5s, best of 3s, but it's best if every single map, every single segment of your game can be won. Now, symmetry is also important. Ideally, your game is symmetrical. I know that a lot of games, just from a design standpoint, do not allow that. Keep in mind, if your game is asymmetrical, in esports competitions, you will need to switch sides and allow both participants to play on both sides, which can have consequences as well, especially in regards to draws. Some core features that you need to absolutely consider when you build a game for esports is matchmaking. I guess nowadays that's essentially a given. What you should consider as well is that early on you might not need skill-based matchmaking. That's something that you can still add later. Custom lobbies are a must-have. If you want to have a tournament, you need to allow participants to pick their opponent, because they sign up for a tournament and the tournament organizer will tell them Team A needs to play against Team B. And you need that functionality in the game. There's still games, big IPs that come out and don't have that functionality. One of the latest offenders were Titanfall from EA and Destiny from Activision, and we had some very uncomfortable talks with some marketing people over there that wanted to do esports, and we unfortunately had to tell them that their game does not support it. And anti-cheat is a core requirement. If you do a PC game that is has any potential for wall hacks, aimbots, anything like that, you need to have a plan in place for anti-cheat. That's also still a problem to this day in major IPs, be it Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, or whatever. They all have anti-cheat problems. There's solutions for that, but you definitely need to have a plan in place. So let's talk a bit about a strategy and things you can actually do as a small company when you want to go into esports. One of the early stages will be at some point family and friends, an early alpha, maybe a couple of 100 people that play your game. And one of the things that you can always do to get the competitive feeling and the competitive mindset going is play with devs. Like, just announce an evening where people can play with you guys, where you can get direct feedback from the players and see how they enjoy the competitive aspect of your game. Tournaments is something that is also very easy to do early on. Obviously, you still need to have some players that are available at a certain time to play, but it's very easily possible. And if you have matchmaking, do it with specific time slots. There's nothing more annoying than waiting in a matchmaking queue for 20, 30 minutes without being able to find a game. That will kill your game. So make sure you limit your matchmaking to certain time slots and only expand once you know you can fill those time slots. So how do you do that? I really strongly suggest to have one main channel for communication. Early on you will not have a big community. Focus them on in one particular place where everybody is basically in the same boat and communicate with everybody else. Out of experience, Reddit has kind of proven to be a very comfortable tool for that. I know it's a toxic community. People have ambiguous feelings about Reddit as a whole, but you can just do private boards. You don't even need to make it public. We see even a lot of bigger publishers like Ubisoft, for example, are currently handling a large chunk of their communication around Rainbow Six through a private Reddit board. It's a great tool to use, and I strongly recommend that. If you have a forum solution, use that as well. But Reddit is free, so I'd say just use that. Social channels, sure, you need to have them. I guess that's a given nowadays. And it's important that you actively communicate in that early stage and really take the feedback that you get from your early adopters to heart. When you do esports competitions, and I think that's a major flag here, handle disputes immediately. One of the worst things that can happen is for your early community to turn toxic, to turn against each other, be it in regards to cheating accusations, being in regards to gameplay bugs that affect one of your tournaments or matchmaking matches. Address that feedback. Handle disputes decisively, and don't feel afraid to rule against players from your community that might at some point become paying customers. It's important to keep your community clean early on. There's a couple of great tools out there that I can strongly recommend to use. It's like doodles or straw polls for figuring out the best dates for your early community, to figure out when you want to have those play sessions. And there's a bunch of do-it-yourself tournament solutions out there that are free. You can just register and run your tournaments. They don't have the feature depth that ESL can offer, but for early small tournaments with a small user base, they are more than suitable. So some more best practices. I feel like streaming is a big one. If you can, stream it just to get some experience as well about how that works, how that affects people. The feedback that you get on stream is also very valuable, because then you will see whether people actually enjoy watching your game. Don't expect giant user numbers. Don't use it as a marketing tool. Use it as a validation of your previous design considerations. If you see your game on stream and you send your early 100, 200 users on there, they will tell you whether they like it, whether they enjoy it. They will say, oh, this was a great match, I really enjoyed it, or they will just tell you, this was boring, I turned off the stream after 5 minutes. And if you want to be successful in esports, your game needs to be watchable. It needs to be enjoyable to watch. And sometimes it can be small changes that make it more enjoyable, like in a shooter, decrease the round time just to get more action going. Rainbow Six is a great example where they started out with a 4-minute round time that led to very slow gameplay. It got decreased to 3 minutes now, and that leads to more fast-paced action, and it makes it just so much more enjoyable to watch. So sometimes there's just small fixes that you can employ once you actually get that feedback. Prizes I would steer away from as much as possible early on. For most people, it's all about the competition. Like half the people that compete in ESL, they don't care about any prizes that we give out. They just want to be in a competition, in a tournament. They just want to have that feeling of playing a game competitively in some form of organized setting. So once you move to the, I call it closed beta here, I mean, it can be any kind of term, but when you increase the number of your players, and you're maybe looking at a couple of thousand players, you're maybe at like 2,000 daily actives. At that point in time, you need to focus on your matchmaking. And matchmaking has a lot of potential options how you can set it up, like the factors that go into matchmaking, the way that the ranking, underlying skill ranking, but also the publicly visible ranking works. And just look at some of the more successful games like Hearthstone, League of Legends, StarCraft 2, and look at the iterations that they went through in figuring out what the best way of doing matchmaking is. There's no general rule about it. There's still no industry standard for matchmaking. I think the only common denominator is that you need to have some underlying skill mechanic that is usually based around some modification of Microsoft's True Skill system. That's also the mechanism that our own white label matchmaking tool Versus uses. Just keep in mind that matchmaking has some pitfalls, especially in regards to party sizes. So initially we recommend not to allow any parties at all until you reach critical size in your matchmaking audience. What we can also recommend is include your early influencers, or if you have influencer contacts, get them in there, because tournaments with influencers, with the key people that already emerged from the early stages in your game, can be a great driver of content, especially around the tournaments that you can easily run yourself. So, tournament rules and dispute handling, again, this is very important. As your tournaments grow larger, there will be more disputes. Your community will become more anonymous. People will not know each other anymore like they did in Family and Friends or early alpha. So people will get angry. That's just the nature of competition. People will get angry at their opponent. They will try to get a win when it wasn't deserved by calling some weird rule that might be somewhere. Address these immediately and decisively. Don't be afraid of ruling against your own players. You will have to do that absolutely. And once you reach open beta, then it gets more interesting because obviously at that point in time you should have reached like 5,000, 10,000 daily active users, and then you can really have fun with the game and try to build up that competitive scene for your top 10, 20% of players that really want to take it to the next level, that kind of regard esports already as the end game of their playing experience. So some of the things that you can do at that point in time would be weekly cash tournaments. That's something that most developers tend to do. That's also something where we can definitely help you with, like setting that up and also handling all the legal aspects of actually giving out cash prizes. Official broadcasts. At that point in time, when you have that user base, there will be an interest in watching your game. And official broadcasts either done by you yourself, like you might have some developer that is good on camera, use him, absolutely. He might turn into something else at some point. Or use existing service providers like ESL to facilitate these kinds of broadcasts. And if budget allows, and if your game is successful, maybe take your game offline. It can go quicker than you might think. One of the examples that we had last year was Rocket League, that kind of, for most people, came out of the blue, where we started working with them early on, essentially following this, this guideline here, where we started out with cash tournaments on a weekly basis with some broadcasts by our in-house commentators, and it just took off from there. And now we have, when we do Rocket League streams, there's tens of thousands of people watching concurrently, and they now have big plans for 2016 in taking Rocket League to the next level and including that offline component. And if your matchmaking is stable, if all the KPIs that you need to look at on a regular basis, be it like time in queue, for example, matchmaking quality based on your underlying skill rating, as well as qualitative feedback from your players, then you can think about expanding your matchmaking functionality, either by including party functionality, by adding additional game modes, additional X-on-X's, depending on your game, obviously. But take it slowly and really experiment it. Maybe offer a new option only for a day, a week, and see how it works. People tend to love these one-off events, and that might give you a lot of very good feedback on what might be in stock for the future of your game. All right, that's more or less it. It's not a long talk. In general, every game is different, so I'm trying to keep this more general, like give you some ideas and starting points. But since every game is so different, and Rocket League is a great example of something that has never been done before, like combining racing and football in a 3 versus 3 competitive arena mode, we need to look at each game individually, and it's something that we like to do. So if you want to get more feedback, I'll definitely stick around. We also have our colleague Arne in the next panel that will also talk a bit more about the topic in general. Feel free to hit us up. We're always happy to help and give you feedback and insights, because we feel we as a company live off good games that are suitable for esports, and we can't wait to see what you guys have in stock in the future, things that we can take and make it maybe the next League of Legends. So thank you very much, and I think we have some time for questions now.
Yes. Question in the back.
Thank you. Do you think there is an esports on mobile? What do you think about it?
Esports on mobile, absolutely. I mean, you see Vainglory right now, which is, well, it has some ambitions and it also has some good numbers to boost. We have Hearthstone, which is a cross-platform title, so it's not purely a mobile game. but it kind of gives pure mobile users now an opportunity to participate in esports. I'm sure we will see much more of that in the future. However, there's obviously some problems with the platform, especially when you're on the go. You will have latency issues, you will have bandwidth issues, connection issues, and in general, if you really want to take esports seriously, you need to be in a place where you have a stable connection, where you can play in peace and really focus on the game. So I think we will see more games that will try to bring esports to mobile. But let's wait and see. I feel it's coming, but we're probably more like 2 or 3 years away until somebody really figures out a more hardcore game in the veins of vainglory that really takes off.
Is there another question? Well, I have one question, actually. You mentioned that mainly synchronous games are the ones that are appropriate for esports. Have there been any examples, though, of an asynchronous game that has done well?
Well, done well is debatable. But in general, asynchronous games steered away from esports so far, but it's slowly changing now. So what we've seen in Asia is some emerging Clash of Clans competitions that actually attract quite a wide audience, because obviously everybody plays the game. I don't feel it's really that attractive to watch, but I think the ambitions that they have are a bit different than the ambitions of traditional synchronous hardcore games. But what we see right now very strongly emerge is esports for racing games. That's going to be one of the major trends this year and next year, where racing and esports kind of converge. One of the games that we recently started competitions for is World Rally Championship together with Big Ben. We have a global program there across all 3 major platforms that is closely tied in with the actual Rally World Championship. The way that works is that the preliminaries of each race event that we do are time trials. So everybody just has like 3 opportunities to put in a time in a like 3-day period. So need to practice before that, but they only have that one shot of putting in their time. And then we take the top of the leaderboard and put them all together in a synchronous race again. Although rally is obviously, I mean, you can't crash into other players. So you see everybody else, you see their ghosts on there. So it's also not fully synchronous, but at least people play at the same time. And I feel like everybody in the racing sphere is right now trying to figure out how to get their racing games up to speed and support esports. And I think time trials and asynchronous play will play a big role in there. We also see interest from casual games, like mainly in the from like football managers and that kind of thing, where they also are looking for more competitive game modes to offer. But that's a tough one, because that really is far removed from esports, where one of the key aspects of synchronous play is that you can actually watch very well, and asynchronous kind of takes away from that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Well, with that, thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much.